Thank you for joining me on Black Women North of 50. I'm really happy to have Dr. Zoe Shaw with me today. She is a colleague, and I'm happy to say she's a friend and has gone through a lot of experiences with being divorced with children, and that's our topic for today. She has a lot of experience being a single parent after divorce, and she was kind enough to come on and talk about her experience. So welcome, Zoe. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. First, I have to say, I love the title of your podcast, Black Women North of 50. Wow, I just love it. I love it.
Thank you so
And
much.
it's funny because I heard you say that I have a lot of experience post-divorce, single mom. I have some, so not as much as probably other women do, but I think that I have an interesting perspective, both as a psychotherapist and as a woman who has been married for almost 3 decades, and now as a woman who is a single mom. But it's just interesting because I have so many different perspectives. And so hopefully I'll have something interesting I can share with your audience.
Absolutely. I have no doubt. I think of you as a single divorced parent
Right.
because
Yes.
there was separation before the divorce. Is
Oh,
that
yeah,
fair? Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, I am that. That is exactly what I am.
Tell me some of the biggest challenges for you. You said you're newly divorced. What are some of the biggest challenges with working with your kids about the transition?
Right. Right. So let's get specific about that. So I've been separated about 2 years, I believe, divorced almost a year and a half, and parenting. I have 5 children altogether. Uh, right now, I only have one child in my home. So my 11-year-old, I have a span of adults all the way to 11. And so I am single parenting an 11-year-old. And the reality is we're still parenting those adult children, and they have to go through stuff when the divorce process it happens. So
Right.
I'm parenting children and adults who are going through have gone through the divorce of their parents. And
Mhm.
I already forgot your question, but what are the difficulties?
Biggest challenges that you're facing right now?
Yeah. You know, I think the biggest challenges for women, specifically women who are at this stage in our life, in midlife, close to midlife, is there's the stigma part. And I think it depends. Have you always been a single mom? Are you just coming into single momhood? I have clients who have chosen the single route, meaning they have gone through in vitro fertilization to become a parent. And
Mhm.
even still, it's the second option. I don't know that many women look at single parenthood as that first option that they wanted for their life.
By
And
second
so
option, by second option, you mean having been married and chosen to divorce.
by second option, I mean plan B. I mean, there's plan A, which is I'm going to parent with a partner, right?
Okay.
And then life happens. Whether life happens and you don't find a partner and you purposefully choose to have a child, or life happens and you lose a partner for whatever reason, your choice or somebody else's.
Mhm.
Single parenthood is plan B.
Got it.
And that can be a struggle. Okay, now I've got to reframe my dream, my fantasy about how my life would be as a parent. And I've got to work with this reality. And
Mhm.
how can I do it in the best way possible? Single moms worry about what's the effect on my children? What is that going to be? How can I parent them in a healthy way so that we mitigate some of those stresses? And then there's a
Mhm.
social stigma about being a single mom. When I was married and I had friends who were single, I would feel like they kind of had this little chip on their shoulder, the single moms feeling like they didn't fit in, if that made
Mhm.
sense. And I always thought, I don't even think about the fact that you're single, but it's clearly on your mind a lot. And I never really understood it. I felt that to some extent they were blowing it out of proportion. Like if you just stopped thinking about that, nobody would care when we talk about social circles and coupling up and who's invited to who. But now being a single mom, it is on my radar so much more. And it's different having many friends who are coupled. And now when I show up to events, I'm not coupled. And it's just a thing. And
Well, a thing, and maybe these are people that you were a couple with at one
right,
point, and now
right,
you're not.
right. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so it's the whole balancing work and home and doing it all by yourself and the children, sometimes dealing with some loneliness, not necessarily because your life isn't full, but because you don't have that person
Mhm.
to do it and support you in doing it. So lots of things that come up. And then we can talk about all the amazing things too, but those are some of the struggles.
Absolutely. I'm wondering about in your experience, if you're open to talk about it, generationally from your parents to your grandparents and further on
Hmm.
if you can. Um,
What was the message? Yeah.
what was the message?
The message was that it's wrong and you don't do it. Marriage is for life, which is what kept me in my marriage for so long. It wasn't until after my father died that I finally decided to get a divorce. It still took me another, I think, 8 years maybe to actually do it. But yes, that messaging was so clear. Having grown up, first of all, in a fundamental Christian home where we are taught that God hates divorce, it's wrong if you divorce, like you could never remarry because then you're an adulteress, and all the
Mhm.
things that like marriage is forever and that's it. You made your choice, and I still value marriage
Mhm.
highly, both because obviously I'm a therapist and part of my work is in supporting marriages. But I also know that marriage can't and shouldn't be an idol. And not all marriages are healthy or should continue. And so, yeah, the message I had is you can't do it, don't do it. And that kept me stuck in an unhealthy marriage for a very long time.
Mhm. The message carried on even when you were having trouble
Oh, yeah.
knowing and thinking like, okay, this isn't working, but you continue to get the message from society and family.
Try
It's
harder, work harder. You
not
just
doing enough.
put in more work, then you
Oh,
can make it work. Yes,
oh
right.
my goodness. In terms of the support you've been getting
Mhm.
and have gotten throughout the process of figuring out what's happening with your marriage, who did you lean on and who was there for you?
I leaned on a lot of people along the way. I leaned on my mom, I leaned on my sister, I leaned on my best friend, I leaned on my therapist. I do have a phenomenal support system, something that I've been very intentional to create. And most of the people in my environment were very, very supportive. Also had people who weren't, whether it was people in my personal life or whether it was my followers, my audience.
Really?
Yeah, definitely. And I have to talk about shame. That's one of the things that I talk about. And getting a divorce when you are a Christian woman, when you are a relationship expert, can create a lot of shame because there's this idea of number one, am I doing something I'm not supposed to do? Am I doing something that's wrong? And then number two, I am this relationship expert and I couldn't make my marriage work. So those are some of the shame stories that,
Mhm.
I had to work through and deal with. And I think it actually made me a better therapist, a better writer. The reality is that there are still people, especially in my sphere, who believe that it was wrong what I did.
It's so interesting that you said that. And going back to your belief system growing up in a Christian home and your work being divorced and being a psychotherapist, because to me, getting a divorce means that you're paying attention
Hmm.
to your interpersonal relationships, not that it's some kind of a horrible stigma or whatever. I'm not good for you for recognizing what you need and want. And I do understand everybody has their own view on it. I guess I just feel the judgment of it is bad. That's
Yeah,
all.
well, I mean, it depends on what circles you walk in. That judgment is real, and that is actually my work to do, is to really help people
Mm,
to understand that all behavior makes sense in its context, to develop some grace. And for me, that was my work to do for myself as well. I mean, people are going to judge, but the reality is that any woman, no matter what her religious background, no matter what the environment that she was raised in, for most women, there is a sense of failure
mm.
in divorce. And
Which means
that
judgment of self.
which means judgment of self and fear of judgment of others. You have all of that going on and so much shame. And
Mhm.
so that's the work for
Mhm.
a newly divorced woman to do, for, single moms to do, is doing that work of
Mhm.
releasing that self-judgment and shame.
Well, you are doing so many things, which we'll get to in a little bit. Squeezing in some self-care. Does that happen?
For me, self-care is non-negotiable. I
Oh, good
can't
for you.
survive and I cannot take care of the people that I need to take care of, both my family and my clients and the people that I serve. I can't do that unless I'm caring for myself. I wrote a book about self-care, and one of the things that I believe strongly about self-care is that self-care is a 360 activity, meaning it's not just one dimensional. It's not just a bubble bath or getting a massage or things that just kind of make you feel good in the moment. So when I think of
Mhm.
self-care, my definition is being a good mother to yourself.
Mm,
And so what does a good mother do? Right? A good mother is nurturing, she's loving, she's soft, she's encouraging, right? She's a soft place to land. She's all those feel good things. And good mothers, I mean, they make you good food, they do all those things. But what else does a good mother do? She makes you go to bed on time. She makes you
mm.
do your homework. She makes you eat your vegetables. She makes you take a shower, right? And then she makes you go back and wash the things that you didn't wash before. A good mother is very intentional about caring for all of you,
Mhm.
even in the things that don't necessarily feel good. And so my self-care includes all of the feel good stuff. Sure, I make time for that, but I also make time for really caring for my body and for my mind and my soul. And so it looks like so many different things. I'm very intentional about my workouts. I'm very intentional about meditating. I'm very intentional about paying attention to what my body needs, and I ask it. I will do things like drive to the beach because even though it's raining outside and cold, because I need to sit right at the waves and bundle myself up and stare at the waves for 2 hours because I need to ground myself. It needs to look different for everybody, but for me, I know I have to get out in nature. And I also know I have to write because writing is my purging. And so I have to do those things that care for me. And the workouts are fine. They don't always feel good, but I do them because I know it's good for me, right? The eating, okay, it's okay. I do it because I know it's good for my body, but the nature I know is really good for my soul.
Very good. I love the idea of 360
Yeah,
self-care.
yeah,
I never thought of it that way. And I mean, I just think of working out and vegetables much more than that.
right.
Yeah, particularly since you're thinking of yourself as the base of care for others. And you got to take care of your base and your foundation before you can give anybody anything. And particularly your family, your kids, their needs, all of those things.
Yeah. We women are, I mean, we are matriarchs, right? Especially when we get to this age. And we've got all of these people we're caring for. We're caring for our children. Sometimes we're caring for grandchildren, right? We have extended family. Sometimes we're caring for our parents. We have our work. There's so much that we take on, especially in midlife for women, that it's non-negotiable. And our bodies are changing. Everything's changing about ourselves, and we have to continually figure out new ways to care for ourselves in this body that is right now.
Yeah, not only the stigma of a single mother, the stigma of what you're supposed to look like, even at this stage in life, and that it's okay to look like someone that you weren't when you were 25.
It's a blessing. Yes. Yeah.
It's weird, but it's a reality. Absolutely. What did you notice about your kids in terms of, I know you've got some little ones and some adult ones. Did you notice a difference in their reactions to your divorce?
Mm. It's interesting that I feel like my oldest son took it harder, even though you would think he's the adult. He's kind of out there doing his own life, but I think it was harder for him to just shift the lens of what his family looked like now, even though he wasn't living home with us anymore. And all of my children are so different and they each dealt with it in a different way. The greatest impact has been with my younger daughter, well, my youngest two daughters, actually. I think maybe it's not so hard because we're doing it in the day to day. Life has shifted very much, and now it's just me and my daughter, Siggy, my 11-year-old, which in some ways it's a blessing because she gets so much of me that my older children didn't get, and we get to hang out and do things that I didn't necessarily wasn't able to do with, when I have this bigger span of kids and I'm navigating and shuttling kids everywhere. But, these kind of life changes are hard on children. They didn't ask for it. they didn't plan for it in the way that I did. I mean, I knew the divorce was coming years before they did. And so I think we just have to recognize that we are asking them to make some big changes that they have no control over, and being able to be in conversation with them and try to pay attention and give them as much of what you can, because when we're going through this, we're going through all of our own change and transition, and it's easy to just kind of cocoon, but we still have these people we have to take care of. They all have dealt with it in their own way, and they're doing great.
What were some of the emotions that came out when you were talking with them about your divorce?
That's a good question. My youngest, it was just sadness, I think. She was like 8 when we, first started these conversations, and it was just sadness and lots of questions like, what is this going to look like for me in my life, as she, should. For my oldest, I think there was probably more anger at his family composition changing and not understanding why. We were married for almost 30 years, and why now? So, I think when we think of grief, I think there was the gamut of all the emotions. The anger, the sadness, the bargaining. Yeah.
I'm wondering, were they aware that there were things that were at issue?
It's interesting because I have all my children are different, as all of our children are. My youngest son was not surprised. He's like, Mom, I'm not surprised. I saw this coming. He was completely like, I understand. I'm not surprised. I saw this coming. My oldest son was like, where is this coming from? You've got two different kids in the same home. And the answer is yes. One noticed, the other completely different, didn't. And the youngest, I think, was just oblivious because she's just, this is all she knew. And there wasn't a lot of overt arguing or any of
Acting
the,
out.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
But my youngest son is just more aware.
I think that speaks to your ability to speak with them their whole lives and be honest with their feelings and pay attention to what they're going through.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering about how people get better at that because the shame, the stigma, and it's difficult to talk to your kids about it in the first place.
Right. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about co-parenting when you're not on good terms with your ex-partner.
Mm, that is such a that's a good topic. That's an important topic. My personal experience, it was not an amicable divorce, but it also wasn't a hugely contentious divorce. We were able to get it done pretty quickly. There was a lot of motivation, on his part to get it done. As beautiful as all of the new ways that people are co-parenting, cohabitating, doing all the things, that's not the reality for our relationship. We mostly don't speak. We text when necessary. We're still only a year and a half out of this, and so there's still a lot of feelings, grief, all the things that need to be worked through. But what I can say is that my perspective has been, this is a business relationship, right? We are in the business of continuing to raise a child. And I say a child because our olders are older. And so, how can I approach this from a business perspective? Which means it's not about my anger, my resentment, his anger, his resentment, all of the emotion that exists after, separating a almost 30-year relationship.
Mhm.
So, when you're parenting or co-parenting with someone that you do not get along with, maybe even don't like, it's helpful to just look at it as a business transaction. I encourage you to do a couple of things. The first is to ask yourself, do I need to say that thing in that way to get across the point I'm trying to get across? Right.
Yeah,
And
sure.
the other thing is, let's stop expecting our exes to be someone they aren't. We are not in relationship with them for a reason. And often what we do is we continue to be surprised, hurt, disappointed when they continue to show up as they've always shown up. Instead, expect it. Of
Yeah.
course, they're going to be disrespectful. Of course, they might be sneaky. Of course, they might do these things, undermine you. Of course. that's probably what they've always done. And so when we get out of this place, and I know a lot of women feel like, well, I'm divorcing him, I should be done with all of that now. And I think that's probably one of the most disappointing things about divorcing when you're, especially when you're still parenting, is that you're still dealing with all of the things, that you dealt with within a marriage, now with someone who's probably more angry at you, not motivated to get along with you, but you still have to do some things. And so when you can work towards acceptance of who that person is, then all of a sudden you're not being triggered everywhere. You're not expecting them to show up in a healthier, better way than they ever have. You don't have that disappointment. You're not riding that roller coaster anymore.
What a very difficult place to get to.
Well, it takes time. I think sometimes it can just be a quick perspective shift if you're really intentional about that. Does it
Mhm.
mean you'll never feel sad or hurt or angry? Of course not. But when we
Right.
expect people to do things, we don't have to have that same personal emotional response when we can separate it and say, that is who they are. I'm no longer in the business of trying to get what I need from them in that way. I need to take care of myself, knowing who they are, and show up in such a way that I have zero expectations from them.
Yeah. Sending messages through their children to their ex.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I'm wondering if you have any advice on how to get past that.
Yeah. And so, I think that that comes down to boundaries, and it's really hard to have boundaries with people who are pushing your boundaries and don't care or respect, right? But remember, your boundaries are for you to uphold. They're not about you setting rules for other people. They're there for yourself. If you do have that kind of thing where your spouse is sending messages through your children to you, the way that you create healthy boundaries is number one, you don't respond. And number two, you can communicate to your child that that's not, something that you're going to respond to, because that's something dad needs to talk to you about himself. And you're not asking your child to go back and tell the parent that. That's then requiring work of your child that they don't shouldn't have to do. But you can
Mhm.
notify your child that that's not something that you will engage in or respond to, because that's a personal thing between, their parent and you. You can go ahead and alert the co-parent that you're not going to be responding to any messages sent through children and that type of thing. But sometimes it's better to just not respond, because sometimes what they're not looking for is a response. What they're looking for is to create an emotional reaction in you.
As you were talking, I was thinking about how delicate children are and how they take these things in, and their first perspective is, what did I do? I
Hmm.
did something wrong here.
Hmm.
How important it is to keep talking to them, even when it's hard,
Hmm.
because they might clam up on you, to let them realize that this is a grown-up issue and you're fine. You've done nothing wrong.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. It's not a good thing that divorce is becoming so common. Let's make that very clear. But I think it does make it a little easier on children because they're seeing it everywhere. And so it's not
Right.
this anomaly that then they need to blame on themselves. Even still, having the conversation, reminding the children that, your dad still loves you, your mom still loves you. We are still even a family. We're just a different family. We're a family where your dad lives over here and your mom lives over here, and they're not together anymore. But we can't really take that family aspect out of it. It's just our family's changing, and it may be expanding and it may be growing, and like you said, it has nothing to do with you. It's just about where your other parent, or your dad and I are right now.
And it's going to be hard for a little bit,
Hmm. It's going to be
and
hard.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Change is
Yeah.
hard. Change is hard.
Even good change.
Even good change is sometimes hard. And so it's okay to just acknowledge that for your
Yeah.
children. It doesn't always stay this way. So even though it feels really hard right now, it won't always be hard. You're going to
Right.
get used to it. And sometimes even just referencing other changes that they've gone through and
Mm.
where they are now can be helpful for them to see, oh, yeah, I did experience that change. And yeah, that was kind of hard, but I'm fine now.
There are some people you're closer to than your ex-husband is, and vice versa. And what is that process like, divvying up the people in your life?
Giving up the friendships, yeah. That's an interesting one, because there's family and then there's friends, right?
Right.
And there's gonna be loss with divorce. There just is. And it's hard for friends to maintain the same level of friendship with each of you after a divorce. And so I think for me, I think in some ways I was lucky. There was just a knowing, like, those are your friends and these are my friends. And our marriage had been pretty separated for a long time. And
Mhm.
so I mean, the best I can say it is kind of he took his friends and I took mine. And I recognize that, family is going to support him. His family is going to support him. But over time, dust settles, right? Life goes on. People develop a little more grace and understanding. And relationships can shift too. So, even if you feel like you've lost maybe family, his family, or friends, it's not necessarily a forever thing just because time changes. And
Sure.
sometimes we learn more about our people when we go through something really hard. And sometimes what we learn about our people tells us that maybe we don't want to continue to be in relationship with those people, and that's okay too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was reading a book called Ambiguous Loss.
Oh,
Um,
I've heard of it. I haven't read it. Yeah.
to be honest, I can only get through some of it before I have to put it down. It's
Yeah.
really hard.
Hmm.
And divorce is one of those ambiguous losses. The person is still alive and they're kind of in your life, but kind of not.
Hmm.
And you're grieving. You're grieving what you had, thought you might have,
Right.
all of that.
This is what I want to say to a woman who may be in a place of recent divorce, because I think when you initiate the divorce,
Mhm.
there's this sense of, well, you wanted this. Why are you upset? Like, this is what you wanted. What's the problem? And I just want to give that woman permission to grieve because nobody wants divorce. Even the person that initiates divorce is because they've figured out it, unfortunately, is the only option
Right.
or the best option. It's a necessary decision, but
Mhm.
nobody wants to do it. And
Yeah.
so you still have permission to grieve a really hard decision you had to make, even if
Right.
you were the one to make it, even if you feel like you've betrayed or rejected um, a spouse, you
Hmm.
still get to grieve because you did it for a reason.
Yeah. And you're grieving the idea of what you thought your
Yeah.
life was going to be like.
Yeah, you're grieving the reality of what you had to do. You're grieving the loss of the expectation of the rest of your life, of the fantasy of the life that you intended to have, the intact family, retirement, the all the things that you thought were
Mhm.
going to happen and you were going to do together. You're grieving that.
Sure.
And it's okay.
Which goes back to really being careful and having giving grace to yourself
Hmm.
about all the feelings that are coming up and
Yeah.
trying really hard not to be self-judgmental when you feel them. Dr. Zoe, thank
Yes.
you so much. Any closing thoughts you have, Black women north of 50, regarding divorce and
Yeah.
children?
This is your second act.
Mm,
And the world is open. The world is wide open to you. It's easy to get into a place of feeling like, oh, that my best years are behind me, or these, I can't change anything in my life. And I would just like to encourage you to dream and imagine and create the life that you want. We are the only people that hold us back. And so in the second act, how can you do all of those things, right? That maybe for various reasons, because of, caretaking and parenting and early career that you didn't have the chance to do. Now's the time. And I encourage you to just step out there and walk through the fear, do it anyway, and live the life that you were meant to live. Live the life that you were meant to live.
and going back to something you said earlier, give yourself time to be still.
Yeah,
Take
absolutely.
that self-care time. I don't know if you can't really see the plaque I have on the wall here that says "Be still. I want
Mm.
to know God's thoughts. Everything else are details."
Oh, that's beautiful. That's
I love
beautiful.
that. And guess who said that? Albert Einstein. So
Really? Okay. Okay. I
I
love it.
love that. Right? And it's so true. I look at that
Yes.
periodically and think, okay, yeah, you're spinning.
Mm-hmm.
Time to take a break.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Dr. Zoe, I would like to hear where people can find you because I know you have a wonderful podcast that has been going on for 5 or 6 years at this point,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
you're doing all kinds of other things. So please let me know.
Yes. So you can find me at the handle Dr. Zoe Shaw, DrZoeShaw, anywhere. All social medias, drzoeshaw.com. I do have a podcast called Stronger in the Difficult Places. I have a book coming out in the spring with the same name. And my podcast focuses on women and difficult relationships and learning how to overcome codependency and shame so that you can experience the healthy love that you deserve. And my podcast just circles all around that, really about working on ourselves, right? Because we're not fixing them, we're fixing you, and that
Mhm.
changes everything. So, yeah, you can check me out at all those places.
Yes, and it's wonderful. And tell me the name of the first book you wrote.
It's called A Year of Self-Care.
That's it. Yes,
Yes,
it's wonderful.
yes. You can get it
And
on
I'm looking
Amazon.
forward to your second book as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all of your insights and uh, stay in touch.
Thank you. Thank you so much for what you're doing. I love the topic of this podcast and it's so needed. So thank you for your work, Gwen.
Thank you.